Shabba-da-dooba, shabba-da-cha. Scoop, scoop-ly-bop-boo, da-dooba-dooba-dooba-da. The personal is political. Welcome to Snake Oil, a podcast where the personal is political. We're your hosts, Juno
and Benzi, coming at you every other Thursday with radical vulnerability and authenticity.
To support the podcast, you can visit our Patreon page at snakeoilpodcast.com. There you can access exclusive bonus material
and other cool perks. You can also support the podcast for free by liking, commenting, or sharing.
Thank you for listening. Today, we're talking about a couple of different things, gender and sex primarily. So yeah, I don't know how to jump into this.
We're only talking about two things. Gender and sex.
That's right. I mean, well, yeah, those are the two things I wanted to talk about today because they're just on my mind and I'm thinking about them. So yeah, I want to talk about gender because our friend had a sci-fi slash future themed party recently. Mm-hmm. And my thing that I wanted to talk about was like the future of gender and specifically gender abolition. So like abolishing the concept of gender, including things like gender identity. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I brought that up and we had like an interesting conversation, I think, with like some other people there, including some like transgender people. And so yeah, I wanted to talk about that. What were their reactions
to it? I actually wasn't part of that conversation.
You actually were there. You actually were there, then you got up and left.
Oh, maybe I was being annoyed by what was being said.
We had a whole conversation, then you got up and left. So okay. Yeah, what I said that I was specifically interested in, well, okay, let me go back. So yeah, my goal personally, what I think should happen in the future, what I hope would happen, is that we actually have the abolition of gender. And I think it's already happening is like the argument that I made. Mm-hmm. So because I definitely think that gender is totally socially constructed. Okay. Like I think there could be biological influences to it, but basically like I do subscribe to the belief that like sex and gender are separate. So like sex is like a whole set of biological characteristics and gender is a whole set of like behaviors, language, social roles, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree that they're separate.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we're on the same page about that. So but then I'm just like, yeah, I'm just trying to set the stage so that other people know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So my whole point was like, I believe that the only reason why gender has been historically relevant, like why these like roles and like appearances, expressions, like ways of dressing, whatever, like language that we use have been created and performed in society is for the purpose of identifying who is of what sex, for the purpose of organizing heterosexual relationships, so heterosexual sex to serve reproduction, basically.
And that's where I disagree with you.
Okay. Yeah. So, well, and that's I'm not talking about sex though, because that's a separate one that I want to talk about too. I have that same argument for sex, but I'm only talking about like the social roles.
Yeah, I
like
don't think that the social roles were purely created to uphold heterosexuality.
Okay, that's interesting.
Because homosexuality has been like prominent through a huge portion of history and wasn't like looked down upon. Okay.
So you don't think that homosexual people throughout history have been like partaking in the dominant gender system that really serves like the purpose of identifying what sex people are is what I mean that's what I guess that's I'm just restating what I believe. But yeah, I feel like homosexual people have just like assimilated into heterosexual society because they've still been a minority throughout history.
Sure.
So I think just because homosexual people did something too doesn't mean that that system isn't for the purpose of organizing.
So I guess
reproduction.
I don't think it had the purpose of organizing heterosexuality. Mm-hmm. Like I don't think it was explicit or on purpose.
Yeah, I could agree with that. Yeah, I don't mean to say like a group of people like at one point came up like let's create this gender system so that we can like organize heterosexuality.
Okay. Because that's what I felt like that post was saying.
Well, I'm not talking about that post right now.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to say. Because that post was talking about the category of sex. And we're going to get to that later in the podcast. I'm just talking about gender abolition as separate from sex.
Okay.
So, like, the idea... So, for instance, like... Well, let me go through my whole argument.
Sure.
And then we can...
Yeah.
Okay. Like, yeah, so what I was saying is, yeah, I feel like the idea of, like, okay, I need to be able to tell, like, what gender you are. All that is saying I want to be able to identify what sex you are later when you don't have any clothes on. So that I can know, oh, do I want to, like, date you? Do I want to try to have sex with you so that I can know whether or not we're going to have babies? I feel like that's the purpose. And I feel like what's happening is that because transgender people are manipulating that function, like people who were born assigned the female sex at birth are appearing as, like, in the same kind of, like, gender roles and, like, gender performance, they're doing this that men would engage in. You often can't tell what sex they were born as, and so that's messing up this entire system of being able to, like, distinguish between the females and the males because of, like, gender nonconformity, whether it's, like, binary transgender people transitioning or being non-binary or just being gender nonconformist. So I feel like this is actually the abolition of gender. Because if you're fucking with that function, that's all that gender is.
Mm-hmm.
So if that doesn't serve that function anymore, then I don't think that gender is really existing. Which is why I actually have an issue with the concept of gender identity still being important within these practices, some of them being, like, practices that are by people who identify as transgender that are actually demolishing gender. So I feel like why not just keep demolishing gender and not identify as a specific gender? That to me is confusing.
I also would prefer a future with abolished gender.
Mm-hmm.
I also sorry, I'm trying to figure out the wording.
Okay.
I think that doing that, because I don't think it's happened. Like, I can say that it's happening, but I don't think it's happened.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think that I definitely can understand that trans people experience a lot of social gender dysphoria, like how they're treated over their gender. So I can see why it would still be important for them to be, like, treated socially like the gender that they identify with.
Mm-hmm. I'm following you.
Yeah, but I would say, like, ideally we would go past that and people wouldn't treat people differently based on gender at all.
Yeah, like, I guess, yeah, my, like, disagreement with that is that I think people can ask to be treated however they would like to be treated, but that treatment doesn't need to be gendered, like, sexed, like, gendered or sexed. Like, I'm wondering, like, if you can, I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think of an example, like, where someone would want to be treated a certain way.
Well, I think it has more to do with the way strangers treat people on autopilot more than the way your, like, friends are individually treating you. Because I do agree, like, the people I'm around with all the time, I create how they treat me. But my, like, quick interactions at a grocery store or going out or something, then most people are in, like, an autopilot type social interactions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think that wanting to be treated like a certain gender is definitely a reaction to living in a gendered world. And so I think that the root of the problem is the system of gender existing that we all subscribe to, whether we're transgender or not. And so that is, like, my goal. Like, let's stop identifying as genders at all. And, like, people who are not transgender, like cisgender people, are the people who do that the most.
Yeah,
like,
so that's my thing is, I also want to be, like, post-gender completely, but I think, and I don't think you're doing this, but I think maybe, like, more like TERFs are doing it. I don't think trans people who are already having like a really difficult time with their experience are the ones we need to be like, you need to quit upholding a gender identity, when the like vast majority of cis people are doing that, you know, including me. Like, I feel like I present pretty strongly as female. So.
Well, yeah. So one, I think that everyone needs to stop doing it, but I think that what I'm saying is, like, I understand why transgender people in a gendered world that is dominated by cisgender people do need to currently, well, need is an interesting word. I think do currently often feel the need to identify strongly as a gendered person in order to be part of like a category that can like fight for their rights and for respect. But I also don't want to like let any group off the hook. Like, if we're all subscribing to a gender ideology that is inherently harmful, then we're all doing that. And so yes, like I think that the people with the most privilege in this situation, those are the people that we need to focus on trying to like stop them from like constantly like subscribing to gender and reifying gender as a system. But yeah, transgender people are doing it too. Like, I don't want anyone to scapegoat on transgender people and say you are the people who are like reinforcing gender. Yeah. Because I don't think that's true. Like, that's not just transgender people who are doing it. So don't scapegoat, but I also don't want to like completely let them off the hook and say, oh, you guys don't need to work on anything. Like, you're fine. Yeah. Like, I don't believe in just validating anything that transgender people do just because they're transgender and part of a minority group. That's what I feel like.
I could agree with everything you said.
Yeah. But definitely, like, people who are not transgender / who are cisgender are the ones who need to stop reinforcing gender. And I think, like, a big thing is, like, stop acting like your gender identity, like, the gender that you subscribe to is, like, natural. Like, I think that's a big thing that cisgender people do.
Yeah, I mean, I even think I do that regularly.
And also, I think, like, everyone should stop. Well, okay, I'm gonna only direct this to cisgender people. I think everyone should stop using gendered pronouns. I mean, I actually want to stop doing that. Like, I want everyone to just refer to me as they, because there's, like, no reason why anyone who isn't currently having sex with me and only wants to have sex with me in a certain way, like if I have certain kinds of genitalia, there's no reason why anyone needs to know like what my gender is or what my sex is without knowing me. You know what I mean? Like, just through language. Yeah. Like, that's not necessary. And so just like changing your language, like if everyone who's cisgender, let's say, just stopped using she and his pronouns, that would be huge. Yeah. How do you feel about that?
It's a hard thing because
you're like, oh my god, I can't do.
No,
how do you feel about that?
No, because like it's hard because my values do like fall in line with that, you know. But then it does like cause a reaction inside me to that. I do like being a woman, you know, and I feel like it affords me a lot of things that men don't get.
Some privileges, yeah.
Yeah, and so while I do think overall the world would be better post-gender, I can say, or I can admit that I feel like for my like personal individual benefit, it's more beneficial for me to be seen as a woman.
And I think you would still be seen as female, probably. Like, I'm not necessarily saying we should abolish the...
I'm not saying the sex female. Okay, I'm saying a woman. Like
the social privileges that you get from being seen, like, perceived as a woman.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah, so it's like a hard thing where the world being better would probably make my individual experience at least mildly worse.
Mm-hmm. Maybe, yeah, you're right. For a while, it would.
Yeah, and
yeah, in your lifetime, it would.
Which doesn't mean I don't want it to happen or don't want to work towards it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a reality, I think.
Yeah, yeah, I'm ready for that reality, I guess. Yeah, I'm ready for that reality. I think that I also want to. Okay, I want to go back. Well, wait, really quick.
Okay.
Would you be interested in like saying what the privileges are that you feel like you get from being socially treated like as this gender woman?
Yeah, one, like, the easiest thing I could throw out there is somebody has agreed to completely, like, financially support me, which I think the chances of someone agreeing to do that with no gender expectations or with me, if I was perceived as a man, would be unlikely, maybe, like, close to zero, you know?
I actually don't agree
So,
with that. That's interesting.
do you know any men who are financially supported by a woman?
No, well, what about by a man? What about same-sex couples in which there's like a stay-at-home
I feel
male
like
partner?
maybe I don't have like the research on it, but I think that's a lot less common than
yeah, you're right.
Men being willing to financially support women.
It is definitely yeah, definitely a, what am I trying to say? Like a gendered expectation and a social norm that like women can like not work and be like housewives. I'm putting that in, or just stay at home, you know, just stay like not work and be supported by a man. That's definitely, yeah, for sure. That's very that's a very big thing in our culture.
Yeah, and I feel like then little things like I don't want to keep bringing up the grocery store for some reason, but like I feel like if I look like I need help, I don't have to I don't have to even ask anybody. Like people will approach me and be like, "Oh, can I help you?" Like, you know?
Yeah.
In general, I find people are like friendly and helpful, and I don't think that happens as much to men.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that I mean, I don't think that gender abolition would or should happen within a vacuum. I think a lot of other transitions would also take place, and I would want certain transitions to take place, like creating totally different like systems and just like expectations of caring about and for other people. And also, I mean, other things that I want to happen are for people to have like their basic needs met in the first place. So
yeah, that's true.
So that like, yeah, like what gender gets social support isn't an issue.
Yeah,
don't have to worry about
it
that.
would be much easier for me to let go of it if like I had UBI and
healthcare,
everything taken care of.
Right.
Yeah.
So I want those things to happen.
I do too.
And they may actually be more likely to happen if we don't have this like gendered idea of like women as social parasites, which I think is a big thing. Like women are just like, I don't know, maybe this is just like a right-wing perspective, I guess, but I feel like a lot of times I've heard like men say, "Oh yeah, women are just trying to live off of daddy government." You know, like if they can't find a man to support them, they're going to try to live off of the government. And if we get rid of like this idea of like a woman is this and is treated this way, then we might just have more of a society of like, well, why can't we just like get everyone's basic needs met?
Yeah.
If we didn't perceive, I feel like, yeah, that's like a huge argument that the right makes against any kind of social support for people.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, like,
is that women will get
these women gold diggers with their, like, these single moms are just going to try to abuse the system and live off of the government. So yeah, that's my perspective on that. But yeah, I wanted to give a little background, like, if you don't mind, unless you because like, okay, just along with this whole conversation about gender, like, I want to talk about like my experience with gender really quick. Like, I actually used to identify as transgender and like and non-binary. I can't say that word right. Non-binary. Like I actually at one point thought that I was like really a man and that I was going to transition into a man and actually get top surgery. And I also used like they and them pronouns, which felt like to me I was using that as like what I thought was like a genuine expression of like my internal gender, which I no longer believe in. Like, I don't know if I believe in the concept of, like, gender being an internal, innate feeling that you can have that's separate from, like, socialization. I just think that gender is performance, like, social performance. But, yeah, so, but, like, I tell you that because, like, what I kind of, like, how do I say this? What was interesting is that, like, I felt what I guess would describe as, like, gender dysphoria off and on for, like, years, and would get, like, really bad depression because I didn't have, like, because I wasn't perceived as male. And I just thought that was, like, I thought that that would give me a lot of relief from a lot of the negative aspects that I perceived of being, like, perceived as a woman, which was, like, I felt like being treated as, like, a sexual object, which made me feel, like, really degraded. So, like, I was trying to escape that is really what I realized after I, like, no longer identified as non-binary and transgender. But also, like, a big thing for me was, like, I realized over time that I have, like, all these feelings, and a lot of these feelings are desires for how I want to be, like, treated and seen by other people, which was, like, I wanted to be seen as just, like, a neutral human being. I felt neutral inside, like, I'm just a person. And so when I was in this, like, transgender period of my life, I felt like, oh, well, that must mean I'm a man. If I don't feel like I identify with all these harmful aspects of being a woman, then I must not be a woman. And so that's why I have, like, a lot of, like, questions and, like, criticisms, I guess, of, like, I guess what I call, like, transgender ideology a lot of times, and just, like, gender ideology in general. Is that I'd realized, like, I don't feel like any gender inside. I just want to be treated a certain way, and the way that I want to be treated shouldn't be gendered. And so that's why I don't like gender.
Okay.
And why I have kind of an issue with the concept of gender identity. Because I feel like, yeah, I don't think, again, that, like, gender is something that, like, lives inside of a person. It's totally social to me.
I guess I feel, like, really conflicted about it because I also have never, like, super strongly identified with being a woman other than, like, enjoying the benefits of the way people treat me, and have felt like if I magically woke up and I was a man tomorrow that I could, like, start functioning in society as a man. So I've never, like, felt super close to a gender, and so I just didn't feel like I could connect to the trans experience of really caring about something like that. So the reason I'm conflicted, I'm saying, is because why would people choose something that's, like, so hard to do and so painful if it's not, like, innate somewhere?
I think people do that kind of stuff all the time. Like, I think people make huge life decisions, life transitions, that are not based on anything innate inside of them. It's based on desire. Okay. And I think those desires are totally valid.
Okay.
Like, those feelings, I think the feelings are valid. Like, I really felt deeply that, like, the way that I was being perceived was not who I really was. But in my mind, I was like, oh, that means that I'm not.
You connected that to gender.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
And it was connected to gender, but I think I also connected it to, like, my body and sex. Yeah. Like, in order for me not to be treated that way, I can't have a female body anymore. Female body, I'm putting in, like, quotes. But, like, yeah, like, I need to get rid of my breasts. I want to be seen as, like, a man so I can be treated better, is what I thought.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then, like, when I became more confident and just, like, was like, okay, well, this is my personality, and I'm going to start telling people how I want to be treated, and, like, fighting for that, then I became less attached to the idea of, like, well, I'm a man.
Hell yeah.
I was like, well, no, I'm not a man. I love my breasts. I just don't want them to make me be treated like crap. You know?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I don't represent any other transgender person's experience, and I don't identify as transgender anymore. But I do think that's, like, a valid experience to share.
Yeah.
You know?
And I do think it's, like, okay for cis people to talk about opinions on trans issues, but I do feel like I can't relate to the experience whatsoever, so maybe I just don't know. Maybe I have, like, no fucking clue.
Yeah, and I mean, I can't relate to the experience at all of, like, going through a transition. I've never done that. So yeah, I can't relate to that either.
Yeah.
I do really relate to non-binary experience. Like, I still would say that I, like, understand that experience because I still often feel like, well, I could easily identify and come out as non-binary.
Yeah.
But I just choose not to because I don't want to reinforce the idea that gender is something, like, essential and true that is inside of me that I'm expressing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to reinforce that idea. What's interesting to me is saying I'm gender non-conforming, and I am consciously choosing, for political reasons, not to buy into certain gendered ideas, including the concept of gender identity. Like,
okay,
I
like that.
you
I
know,
do like that better. Because
Okay.
one thing I think about with non-binary, and it's been something I've thought before, is that it upholds the idea that if I'm not like a super feminine and I have a vagina, then I'm non-binary, rather than
Right.
females like can have masculine qualities.
Yeah.
But I do like the term of like gender non-conforming. It sounds more like an action than something that you are.
Right, yeah. And I think it's important to denaturalize things, like to recognize the political nature of identity. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
of identity only as social, in like any situation, really. Like, I'm critical of identity in any category. And I definitely would say, like, I don't identify as cisgender, which is why I'll often say, like, a person who is not transgender / a cisgender person, because I'm not really into, like, the transgender cisgender binary itself. I think there's, like, I think just because you don't identify as transgender doesn't mean that you are cisgender and that you do identify with the gender that society is perceiving you as. Like, I don't.
Okay.
But I'm not transgender either, so I'm just gender non-conforming, or trying to be.
Yeah.
Trying to abolish gender. But yeah, I was gonna say something else about gender too. I don't know. I just know I forgot my thought.
Oh.
It was something I thought of a minute ago. With all of that said, like, I would never, like, misgender someone, like, to be political.
Oh, yeah.
Well, wait a second. I would never misgender a transgender identifying person. I would totally, like, fuck with people who are really attached to being, like,
okay,
like, the gender they were assigned at birth. Because I think they're
I can see that
the people.
as valuable.
Yeah, like, I don't want to, like, I would never, like, try to, like, give someone gender dysphoria who was, like, transgender, or, like, not use the pronouns that they want. Like, I'm always going to use someone's, like, pronouns, if they're transgender. But I really just want to start using they for most people. But I won't do that to, like, a transgender woman.
That's what I do know some trans people don't like gender neutral pronouns because it's not, like, upholding the gender.
Their gender identity, yeah. And I do think that's problematic, but I also don't want to hurt people's feelings. So there's that conflict that I have.
At least not, like, those people's feelings more than they're already hurt constantly.
That's true, yeah. I definitely don't want to do that. I would rather I can challenge cisgender people.
Absolutely.
With the same thing by calling them they all the time.
Yeah.
So that's what I will do.
And a lot of cis people have already practiced this a bunch, and they don't even know it. When you're cheating on your partner or just hanging out with someone of the opposite sex, and you want to hide it, you say they. I mean, I know I've done that in the past. Okay. And I have definitely experienced, like, guys who are dating me in the past do that. They'll just keep referring to someone as they when it's
when you
woman.
Don't want people to know, like, the sex, whatever, gender of the person. Yeah.
So you're actually probably already good at it.
Right. Just start using it all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. I
totally agree with that. If I think of anything else to say about gender, I will chime in and say something. But I also want to talk about the quote that you had an issue with that I posted on Facebook. So I posted this, like, picture of a book that I actually got a long time ago when I was super into lesbian feminism and was like identifying as a lesbian fully, whatever that means. But yeah, it's a really amazing book actually by Monique Wittig. It's called The Category of Sex. No, it's not. It's called The Straight Mind, and it has like a bunch of essays in it. One of them is called The Category of Sex. I feel like I need my glasses for this, so I can't fucking see.
My glasses.
But yeah, so I posted this like page from it that had some lines, some things underlined. That said, this is all it said, okay? There's like a whole context surrounding it though.
This is all I read.
This is all she read and all they read.
Wow.
I know. Would you? Okay, wait. How do you actually feel? Like, let's say I start using they. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to get used to that. Like, actually.
I do think it's a better thing to do. So I support it, even if I lost all the benefits.
I feel I really want to do that politically, and I want to find other ways to like be gender non-conforming. Too. Yeah. I guess I don't know.
Before we start on that, I actually would be interested in saying a little bit more.
Yeah, go for it.
Something I've been thinking a lot about is, I don't know if we've talked about this on the podcast. We definitely will in the future. I used to be extremely racist and considered myself a race realist. And part of that to me was feeling like I just naturally wasn't attracted to anybody who wasn't white. And then once I wasn't having those thoughts anymore, like I can explicitly remember like watching The Walking Dead, and the character Michonne was like the first black person I was ever attracted to. I'm going somewhere with this.
Oh, I believe you. No, I'm listening.
And like realizing like it was like a big moment for me, like, oh, I wasn't just like naturally not attracted to that. There were other things surrounding it.
Yeah.
And right now, still currently, I have a really difficult time feeling attraction for androgynous people. Like, I like pretty feminine women and pretty masculine men.
Mm.
And so that's just like something I've been thinking about a lot lately.
Like what that means?
Yeah.
Like if you could change
that mean
thinking about it, then maybe it would change your feelings about it?
Yeah.
Interesting. I definitely think that our thoughts can change our feelings.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly.
Yeah.
Because
But it just makes me wonder, like, what is my fucking problem? Honestly.
Yeah, no, I totally feel that. Yeah, I also would say that I'm pretty strongly attracted to, like, normatively feminine women. Like, yeah, normatively, well, that's not necessarily true, though. I'm very attracted to, like, transgender women. Which I guess are not considered, it depends on, like,
well,
their, like,
I am too, if they're feminine, yeah.
Yeah, if they're feminine, right. But I guess, like, what degree, like, some people would, like, that's subjective.
Okay.
Like, I actually don't need a transgender woman to be, like, super, I don't know, to, like, pass at all for me to be attracted to her, as long as she has some, like, feminine qualities. And I think that is problematic. I think that's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm also not very attracted to, like, sexually attracted to androgynous people, regardless of their gender identity.
Yeah.
I'm attracted to, like, masculine men and feminine women. Also regardless of, like, whether they're transgender or cisgender. Yeah. As long as there's, like, peak masculinity and peak femininity, which I think is totally socially constructed. Like, I think I've totally internalized some, like, problematic gender norms.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I can't just be attracted to people.
Yeah.
Who aren't displaying, like, masculinity or femininity. I love to deconstruct, but I don't know how.
I don't either.
I don't know, yeah.
And I feel like, so there is someone who's, like, kind of androgynous that I am pretty attracted to right now.
Okay.
But I still feel like, to me, they're, like, feminine enough. And I feel like a douchebag even saying that, you know? For me to, like, categorize them as, like...
Yeah.
Like, they're they're still pretty feminine in my eyes, but they're, like, as close to androgynous as I've ever been attracted to.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting because what you consider to be androgynous, I've noticed, is not androgynous to me.
Okay.
So, like, there's a person who you said was, and then you immediately were like, well, that person's too androgynous for me.
Mm-hmm.
I actually think that person's, like, pretty far to the like, they're on the masculine side enough for me to, like, have some attraction to them.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think I have, like, way less, what am I, like...
Yeah.
Less limits on that? I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
So they don't have to be, like... I don't know what it is, yeah. Yeah, I guess I've just internalized the gender binary.
Yeah, it's fucking... I don't know what to do with
it. It's
it.
dumb. It's really...
Yeah.
It's, like, stupid. It's not functional at all for relating in a, you know, liberatory way at all.
Part of me wonders if, like... See, I don't know what to say to, like, not be, like, a horrible person.
I don't think you should try to say things to not be a horrible person.
I know.
I think you should just say what you think.
Okay. Part of me wonders if, like, the easiest way for me to, like, overcome this is to, like, already be in love with someone who then, like, decides to present as more androgynous.
Yeah.
You know?
Mm.
And then, like...
Maybe it'll be me. No, I'm joking.
See,
I don't think I'll ever cut my hair.
Like, I just had an emotional response to you saying that.
Oh my gosh.
Like...
Uh-huh.
That's scary to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do my hairy legs turn you off?
No.
Honestly?
Not at all.
Well, what's interesting to me, we can come back to this.
Yeah.
I actually have a problem with the idea that having hairy legs is considered masculine. Like, I think that's really stupid and it's not masculine.
I think that's kind of going
at all.
away. At least in our friend group,
Yeah.
I feel like that's
like if
away.
both, well, I mean, it doesn't even make any sense, like, biologically, like, with the idea that, like, gender is supposed to signify your biological sex. Because, like, if you naturally grow hair, you know what I mean, on your legs, both sexes do.
Yeah.
So that means it's not gendered. That's stupid.
Yeah. I actually
Right?
don't connect that to gender.
Yeah. I also don't connect having long hair to gender because some super masculine guys
Oh, yeah.
have really long hair and it's really fucking
I'm
sexy.
super into hot men with long hair.
Yeah. I consider hair to be genderless, pretty much. Depending on your head or your legs or your genitals or your armpits.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you have
So
hair on your
what-
face, then
Okay.
I'm starting to feel like, okay, this is changing my perception of this person's gender.
Okay.
If they have a lot of hair on their face, then I'm like, okay, well, that is masculine to me. And I guess that could be challenged too. I don't know.
Yeah.
Although I think, like, the reason why I do think that's gendered is because it's typically sexed and, like, influenced by the hormones that
Yeah, it's
either a male or a female has
it's
in their
very
bodies.
rare for the female sex to
Have a bunch of hair on their face.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a beard.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I perceive it as gendered, because it's biologically sexed usually.
Yeah.
For the most part. I understand it's not always a clear binary. Yeah.
Okay. I feel scared.
You ready to move on?
I feel scared that I said all those things.
Okay.
I don't know.
Just feel the fear and go for it.
Okay.
As they said in that one movie. I don't
And
know.
I just want to, like, reiterate that I super want to support anybody expressing gender nonconformity. And it's not, yeah, I want to support that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I understand, yeah, you don't want to sound like you're against transgender people.
I'm not.
Is that...
Yes.
Right, I mean, I'm not either, but here's the thing. We can both say as much as we want we're pro-transgender people. Well, I don't know. It's hard to... I'm pro-people in general. And I'm pro-people living their lives however they want to. I'm not pro-gender, though. And so some people are going to perceive me as being transphobic based on that. And I guess I'm willing to accept that. But I'm not going to sacrifice my belief that the gender system is a harmful system. And again, I'm holding cisgender people responsible for upholding that system.
Yeah.
The most. But again, like I said, no one's off the hook in my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I will be perceived as, like, anti-transgender based on that. You didn't say that I said most of those things.
I agree with the statements you said, though.
Okay.
And I could stand that I agree with those.
Mm-hmm. And I'd be totally open to having, like, conversations about this with transgender people.
I actually think it would be really useful for us to do another podcast with some people that we know who identify as trans.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be totally into that.
Actually, most of the trans people I know are non-binary and not binary trans people.
Same. Yeah, me too.
So, but I still think even them, it'd be useful to have on for this, for further conversation on these subjects.
Yeah, I would, and I'm totally open to, like, being shown how I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But, yeah, this is just what I truly believe right now about gender. Yeah, but I'm saying, I guess my point is, like, yeah, you can say as much as you want. Like, you might still be perceived as, like, anti-trans just based on the fact that you agreed with the statements I just said.
That's true. And I guess I can accept that.
Yeah, okay. Which is hard. Like, I do wish that there were... I don't like that, obviously. Like, not because it doesn't actually, like, feel, like, hurtful to me. Because I'm not, like, the vulnerable person in the situation. Like, transgender people are the vulnerable people.
Yeah.
But it frustrates me that I feel like I can't have a critical conversation about gender and my perspectives on the harms of gender without maybe being, like, seen as, like, anti-trans because I reject gender identity. Like, well, I don't reject gender identity. Obviously, like, you can't opt out of, like, a gender identity system that exists where people are going to identify as a certain gender, but I reject, like, gender identity ideology that says, like, gender identity is innate.
Should exist.
To you. Like, is innate and, like, should be expressed and is, like, like, a real thing that precedes culture and society that isn't just performance. So I do have a problem with that, and I know that, like, I'm going to get backlash for that, and I would be happy to have conversations about that. And would actually love to.
Yeah.
Because I want to know, like, the truth. Like, my goal is to understand reality as much as possible and to understand people as much as possible and then, like, change society to make things what I consider to be, like, more in line with truth and also justice at the same time. So, yeah.
No gods, no masters.
Right. Yeah, and I also, like, never want to misrepresent my perspectives or, like, hide what I really think in order to, like, save myself from being criticized or, like, even to not hurt people's feelings, because that's how important, like, getting to the truth of things is.
That's something I really appreciate about you, and something I feel like you've inspired in me a lot, is less willing to, like, hide how I feel, just to avoid criticism, for sure.
I mean, thanks.
Yeah.
I definitely have done that, and I feel like this podcast is also, like, getting me to overcome that, because if I want to express my ideas, then I'm going to have to express my ideas.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And even before the podcast, just talking about having the podcast and talking about how we were going to be open with our ideas no matter what, it gave me more confidence to do that. Yeah. Okay, now we can talk about your lesbian feminism.
Okay. Just to be clear, I'm not a lesbian feminist, like, as a label. I'm not.
I know.
But I used to be. Because they were so, like, critical of gender, and I felt like gender had just, like, fucked me, you know? Like, it had just ruined, I felt like gender had ruined my life. And so lesbian feminism was, like, a safe haven for me. Like, I felt like, oh, these people understand, like, how horrible this experience has been of, like, being a woman and being perceived as a woman. So, yeah, I really needed this.
And maybe part of the reason I've never connected to feminism, first of all, as a, like, more right-wing anti-feminism to, I don't know what I'd call myself, anti-feminism now, you know? But definitely not anywhere close to right-wing. Is because I have never felt like it was hard to be a woman. Like, it's always felt like the easier thing to me.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think there are pros and cons to both. But I definitely feel like I've been, like, horribly hurt, specifically because of my sex and my gender. Yeah, like, like, I feel like I've been, like, really seriously, like, traumatized from misogyny. So, yeah. That's
Yeah.
why I was, like, super feminist for years. I don't know what I call myself.
Yeah.
I don't know what I call myself now, is what I said. Okay, so the quote that I had on this page was... Okay. Where is it? I put so many things because I took a bunch of notes before this podcast about this book. Okay, this is the quote. It said, where is it? Sorry, I'm going to find it. Okay. For the category of sex is the product of a heterosexual society, which imposes on women the rigid obligation of the reproduction of the species. That is, the reproduction of heterosexual society. The compulsory reproduction of the species by women is a system of exploitation on which heterosexuality is economically based. That's pretty much what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I still have some resonance that still resonates with me.
Okay.
But you don't like it. So now we're switching to sex.
Okay.
From gender. Let's talk about that. What's your issue
Sure.
with that? You have it right here if you want to look at it.
Yeah. So I will say, not like, I don't want to make an argument from naturalism, but sex is natural. Like, there's nothing more natural than, like, how you come out and have no choice over it. You know? Only the female sex can have children. So I feel like the idea that, like, misogyny put the obligation on, or the patriarchy put the obligation on women to have children sounds absolutely ridiculous to me.
Okay. Define what the female sex is. Define it.
Sure.
Sorry.
Vagina.
You're like, I can tell you're, like, annoyed of you for just saying.
Because
I'm
not interested in...
No.
I'm not interested in saying, like, oh, women who can't have babies aren't women.
You have to define it. 'Cause I'm going to tell you why in a minute.
Okay, sure.
Because you're saying...
I'll say, and this is for sex only, chromosomal, then.
You're saying what defines what sex you are is your chromosomes.
Sure.
Okay, that's literally not true.
Okay.
That is scientifically not true.
Okay.
Because there are actually, like, like 5 different biological categories of whatever functions, aspects that make someone female or male.
Okay.
So it's chromosomes, it's hormones, it's gonads.
Okay.
I'm gonna forget what some of the other things are. It is secondary sex characteristics and genitals.
Okay.
So you can have chromosomes, but then not have the genitals. Like, not have the expected genitals. Or you can have the chromosomes and not have the kind of hormones.
Okay, then I'll say then my definition is someone who has all 5 of those things.
That's what a female is.
Sure.
So if someone only has 4 of those things, they're no longer female. What are they? Male?
I don't know.
Well,
I don't care.
No, but you can't say you don't care, though. You're the one who just... I know, I'm like... You're like... What my point is that that is the concept of sex is totally socially constructed from a lot of very real and objective biological characteristics that people have. But the idea that there's this category where there's females that supposedly are all the same, that's what, like, there are these, you know what I mean, that make them female, just, like, is not true. That's a human-made category. You really do.
I don't know.
You don't like it.
I don't, because I feel like even if all females can't have babies, only females can have babies.
I don't think that's true. Okay, wait. What if... Okay.
Or intersex people with reproductive organs.
So that's not a female then.
How? Okay.
If someone's intersex, that's not necessarily female. So that's not true, right?
Okay. I feel like that's not... I feel like that's just a rare situation. Then.
Okay.
But the idea that, like, sex was this, like, created thing still feels silly to me.
Well, I was just like, I want to address that too. I was just going back to your concept of, like, well, your argument for why the idea that it could be, like, socially constructed is ridiculous was because you're like, only females can have babies.
Okay.
And that's a real, that's like an objective category. Can we agree? Maybe we can't agree, but, like, my perspective on this, like, quote and, like, the essay in general, is that if we have these, like, categories that people came up with, I'm not saying that there aren't real, like, characteristics in the natural world that exist that facilitate sexual reproduction, but we have this category with a word that is female, that's a piece of language that a person came up with, to put a bunch of people in a certain category to designate them as child bearers.
Sure.
Is that not the social construction of the female?
So, I just feel like they would be the only people who could do that no matter what, and be expected to uphold the species continuing.
Right, they'd be expected to. That's the social construction aspect. That is being taught, like, that is said in this text. We're expected to have babies. So a lot of things in our society are all organized around trying to get us to have babies. I'm not saying it wasn't important, but it was still socially constructed. And women contributed to that too.
I guess I don't agree that it was socially constructed still.
Okay, why not?
Because I just feel like every animal who has only one of them can create the next ones.
It was like sexual reproduction?
Yeah.
Okay. Wait, what? Were we gonna...
that's what they do.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think that, like, negates my point, but...
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Like, yeah, there are these beings in the world. Some of them can have babies.
Okay.
Like, let's say this is like... Okay, wait. Here's my thing. I don't think that a social construction means that it doesn't have a basis in biology. Okay. You can take biological characteristics, right? But then us making a taxonomy out of it, that is the social construction. Like, even the idea of species, that's socially constructed because a human created this whole taxonomy and said, well, you belong in this category and you belong in this category. That is a concept.
To me, I find language that, like, describes scientific concepts as more like math. Like, it's a communication, like, it's a necessary communication of information. So I don't relate that to being social.
That is still social, though. A necessary communication of information is a social act.
Okay, sure, it's social.
Okay. Yeah, it's socially constructed.
Sure.
Okay.
So then my continuous problem with that, I don't want this computer.
I'm getting the computer for me. I'm looking at the quote again.
So then the thing I still have a problem with is I do feel like that quote, at least my reaction to what it says, makes it feel like it was on purpose to uphold heterosexuality. And I think neither of those things are true.
So, yeah, it's looking at how things are socially constructed, I don't at all think means that there were, like, a group of people who got together and said, okay, we're going to deliberately create this, like, right now to try and make this thing happen. I don't think it was it was, like, a conscious decision by specific people. But we can agree, right? I keep saying we can agree. We may not be able to.
Know.
But give me 1 second. I almost have this thought fully formulated. It is beneficial. Like, it does facilitate heterosexuality, like the heterosexual unions, to have a group of people who are considered female and a group of people who are considered male. Because without those categories of sex, there would be no such thing as heterosexuality.
But I feel like heterosexuality has only become important, like, in recent human history.
That's totally true. Yeah.
Okay.
For sure. Which actually supports the social construction theory.
How?
Because if it weren't...
Because I feel like sex was
it historically developed.
For a long time, sex categories existed before people cared about forcing people to be heterosexual.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. That's a good point. Okay, here's my critique. In modern times, okay, I don't think that heterosexuality is important anymore. Like, I definitely agree that, like, in early human history, I think that, like, trying to reproduce your community, like, to make sure that there were children who could do labor, to make sure that your community doesn't die out, yeah, sexual reproduction was, like, vital.
Sure.
For sure. And so, like, these categories were totally important to survival. And even, like, coerced. Like rape culture was, like, huge in, like, early human history. Like, women were just, like, taken as, like, tribal prisoners and raped in order to, like, have more babies for that tribe. But we no longer live like that. We don't need to, like...
I agree. Not only do I think we don't need to, I think we shouldn't.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think we should either. Like, we no longer need to make sure that, like, males and females get together and have babies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so why do we still have the concept of sex then? Why is that so important to people? Like, what sex you are?
I think, okay, so I think sex categories existed. Heterosexuality became important later, and sex was used as a tool for that, but I don't think it was created as that tool. But I think it was used as that tool.
But you could say that we're reinforcing and creating the category of sex every day.
Yeah, and then I think it is continuously used because I don't think we're past that point of people considering heterosexuality important.
So it's continually socially constructed every time we use the concept.
It's consistent, yes.
That's
at least upheld.
What I think. Well, I think that by upholding it, we're continually creating it because we could stop upholding it and then it would just die.
Okay.
So I don't think that this writer is necessarily saying in the beginning of time, you know what I mean? Like, a group of people came together and created sex.
So I still think, though, that it relates, like, sex was on purpose to uphold heterosexuality, when instead I think it was just later used as a tool to enforce heterosexuality.
Yeah, I don't think there's really that much of a distinction between those two things. Okay. I think that's, like, but wait, you said that, like, sex existed. That sex categories existed. They didn't. Okay. Sex categories do not just exist in nature.
No,
they are created by people.
I'm saying sex categories were defined long before heterosexuality became important to society.
For sure. Okay. Well, I don't know. I don't know when heterosexuality became important to society. And what society we're talking, like, I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't know. My knowledge, I guess, is, like, Eurocentric, and I know that, at least in some areas, homosexuality was, like, rampant and positively viewed before the Crusades and, like, Christianity was popular.
Was it, like, male homosexuality, or was it also female homosexuality?
What I know about is mostly male-focused.
Okay.
So I don't know.
I mean, to me, that means that the role of, like, the female as, like, the reproducer was still really important at that time. Because I feel like there's an argument to be made that, like, historically all society has actually been, like, homosexual. That, like, economic relations are typically, like, homo relations between men. And women are really just, like, seen as these, like, reproduction resources. So I still think that, like, just because homosexuality was rampant, homosexual behavior doesn't mean that heterosexuality was not valued and, like, promoted for the reproduction of the society.
Okay.
I know I'm arguing pretty hard for this.
Yeah.
But I just want to have my perspective known.
I guess I'll say, even if that is, like, 100% accurate, which I just don't have the history information to know, I hate that statement.
Why do you... I feel like you should have a good argument for why.
Because I feel like the state, like, with all the information, that statement is still saying that it was like all on purpose, and it's like this evil thing that's been done to women. And I
think that can sound that way, but I think like, yeah, I understand what you're saying. If it's just taken the way that it's written, and it's not like I think investigated like what function that serves, then yeah, I can understand how that sounds like inaccurate. Like, no, a group of people didn't get together at like the dawn of time, you know what I mean, and like decide that like we're gonna create males and females for like heterosexuality. Like, no, that didn't happen. But what I think is important about these types of texts that like recognize how things are socially constructed is that they're trying to highlight the consciousness that does go into these ideas that we think are just completely natural. And so I think it can easily sound like it's saying like we created everything consciously, but it's just trying to get us to recognize that some human consciousness goes into the creation of these things, and that it's not totally natural. Okay. And that is really what the essay is trying to say as a whole. Like, if you read the whole essay, which I know you're not going to, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
But yeah, that's really the point of the essay, is that the category of sex is not just a natural category that has always existed. It was created at one point to describe what people thought of the natural world, to really like describe what people thought was the most important things about the natural world. And then we keep creating it every day. Every time we reference sex, we create it again, anew. And that has a specific purpose. And in the modern era, it's no longer necessary for us to do that for our survival. Also, I don't think that women should have to have the burden of playing a certain role, like a reproductive role in society, just because we're females. And that's why the category of female may no longer be relevant. If we're not having babies, why does it matter that we're female? You know? Okay. Other than like a doctor in a private doctor session. That's what I was
just gonna say, like I said, I don't have enough like medical information, but I think there is a thing. You can't just like give women the same medical treatments or the same drugs or whatever, because it could react different to their hormone levels.
For sure. So that could just be private information that's shared between a doctor and a patient. But
then the category would still have to exist.
Yeah, I understand that, like, the category of, like, I have these certain types of, yeah, for sure. I think that's important. I do think that's useful. But socially, in every other aspect of my life, I don't think that's necessary.
Well, yeah, because I feel like socially sex doesn't matter. Only gender would matter.
Yet, when we earlier talked about, when we talk about gender identity a lot of times, we'll often use the concept of sex to differentiate that from someone's gender identity. And so that could even be problematic. Like, we do keep creating it. Mm-hmm. Like, I have created sex over and over again in this conversation by referencing it as separate. You know what I mean? As like a more prime aspect of who someone is, what they are, rather than their gender. And it could be just as socially constructed.
I guess I feel like I don't have enough information to have a super strong opinion about it.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I've read a ton about it, so that's why I've read a ton of stuff about this.
And I can be honest and admit that almost anything with the word feminism attached to it causes me to react.
Which I think that's not good.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I don't identify as a feminist either, but, like, feminist theory has, like, a lot of actually really interesting stuff in it that you don't necessarily have to agree with, but I think can, like, challenge a lot of the assumptions that we take for granted in our society. Like, I think there's some good feminist theory out there, for sure.
I'm sure there is.
I mean, I don't know. Yeah. You don't have to think there is. Thanks. But it's my experience.
Yeah.
I've gotten a lot out of feminist theory.
I would be shocked if I didn't read anything feminist ever that I didn't agree with, you know?
Yeah.
And I like memes sometimes and stuff that might be written by feminists.
Yeah. So. But I don't want, like, the word feminist to just turn you off at all from, like, maybe...
well, I do think the concept of, like, the word feminism I already don't like. That it is, like, focused on the oppression of females, and I feel like doesn't acknowledge like the insane amount of privilege that we also receive.
Yeah, I also agree that it doesn't reference all of the privileges that women get. And I guess I think that's okay.
Okay.
Like, I think there's a separate conversation that can be had about the privileges that women get, but I think that there are oppressions that women, like, have experienced historically and that we're still experiencing. And I think it's fine for, like, there to be a movement specifically just focusing on that. You know? Like, it's an exclusive movement for that issue, and I think that's okay. And I also have a lot of problems with what goes on in that movement, which is why I don't identify as a feminist. But yeah, like, I think specifically what raises the issue for me is, like, all of the, like, reproductive, what am I trying to say? The abortion restrictions that are going on, like, are specifically, like, targeting people assigned female. And I think that could be a reason for, like,
and I do care a lot about reproductive rights.
I know you do.
I want to fucking kill all the babies that try to sneak up in there.
Yeah. And that doesn't have to be a feminist issue, but that's a reason why feminism is still relevant, I think. Yeah. Or it could just be a reproductive justice
I just
issue.
wish that it could be like we could focus on individual issues and it didn't have to, because I feel like feminism is like huge giant scope that could cover 5 million things.
Yeah.
And I would rather like come together with a bunch of people and like agree we want to like fight for reproductive rights than be at odds with people because of like all these extra things that I don't want to accept that come with feminism.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah. I totally understand that. And I don't think you would have to accept those things. I think people do come together and fight for reproductive rights regardless of how others identify. Okay. You know what I mean? Like, you could easily do that without identifying as a feminist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In some situations, I mean, you know, there's definitely like a lot of groups who care a lot about social justice stuff that won't interact with people who identify certain ways.
Yep, totally.
So,
oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I just don't think like the reproductive rights movement is like one of those where they would exclude you for not identifying as a feminist specifically.
Yeah,
I'm just
maybe like
referring to
individual groups might, but yeah. So
yeah, I
am okay with exclusive groups too. So
for sure,
what the fuck ever.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like why like even though I don't identify as a feminist because I don't want to be associated with a lot of the things that I disagree with that are just like huge like part of like this huge plethora of different versions of feminism, which annoys me. But like part of why I think that like feminism is still relevant is because I do think that women, like the category of woman, has been socially constructed throughout time to be a sex class specifically, and that's what I want to oppose. I don't think I need to identify as a feminist to do that, to oppose that, but that's why I would say like I would just identify as a gender abolitionist, and that's my political identity when it comes to gender, not feminism specifically.
See, and so. I like stuff like that because I feel like that has like a clear goal that can be accomplished, and then like there's no reason to be a gender abolitionist anymore. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And one of my problems with feminism is I feel like there is no clear goal, and there's no like accomplishing it, and then you could dismantle feminism. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
I totally agree with you. Yeah,
and
I think
something
like
I care about.
Yeah, I think feminism is going to go on forever because I think that for the most part, I mean, I guess like what it seems like pop feminism is, and even like academic feminism, it's like finding more and more and more grievances, like finding more and more little things to be upset about, like air conditioning like makes women colder or something, or like manspreading, you know, or even honestly mansplaining, which I don't think is a gender specific thing.
It's just people being condescending. Like there's tons of fucking condescending older women or younger women too. Like there's so many condescending people. It's very annoying. It's not just something men do.
Yeah, like not even in a majority. Like I don't think I've experienced people being condescending to me and like talking too much and explaining things to me that I already know predominantly from men.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that's definitely not a gender issue whatsoever. That's just people being fucking annoying and then tell them to shut up. Basically. So yeah, I am sick of like all the stupid bullshit that I think like feminists focus on. To the depth, like to like ignoring a lot of the issues in like other parts of the world where women are being like actively
still having their clitoris cut off,
concretely oppressed, right? Like not being able to drive, or being killed if you're raped. So like all of those things. Yeah, and I have a lot of issues with like feminist sexual assault and consent rhetoric, which I feel like is something I've touched upon in like our first episode, but I feel like we could do a full episode just about that.
Yeah, for sure.
At some point.
I have no doubt that we'll talk a lot more about consent.
Yeah, for sure. I think so. But yeah, I guess. Do I want to say like one last thing about feminism that I was thinking? I think I do. Yeah, I think like there's this perception within feminism that I see that like women are always like perpetual victims. And I feel like in a lot of ways, feminism is actually like disempowering.
I agree.
Women, and kind of like framing us as. Maybe I should see. I feel like this is interesting.
This is, I think, too much to go into.
I know. No, I'm gonna stop. But like, I'm just saying, the way that I'm using like woman all the time is completely going against my goals to abolish gender, and feminism is a barrier to that goal, is what I'm realizing, which is why I'm not a fucking feminist, because it reinforces the concept of gender as somehow important. And I want to get away from that and just say, treat me like a person, stop treating me like a woman, because I don't want to be treated like a woman at all. And I don't want to even have to recognize people as women. Yeah. So that is my goal. Not to say women as a category exists and women should be treated a certain way. Just treat people this way, all people, regardless of how you are choosing to label them, and stop labeling them. So yeah, that's what I want to end on.
Okay.
We'll have a fuller conversation about feminism and all this stuff later. I can't. Yeah, we can't do it. All right.
All right. Thanks. If you enjoyed this conversation, subscribe, leave a comment with all your thoughts on gender abolition, trans issues, feminism, the stuff you want to hear us talk about in the future.
The category of sex.
Yeah, the category of sex as a social construction. And anything else you can think of that you'd like to hear about. Again, I'm Benzi.
And I'm Juno.
And this was Snake Oil.
Thanks for watching.
Listening. If you want to hear more from us, subscribe. You can also support the podcast by visiting our Patreon at snakeoilpodcast.com.
We love connecting with our listeners, so we've also set up a P.O. Box where you can send us anything that you would like. And the address for that is P.O. Box 1436, Warren, Michigan, 48090.
You can also support the podcast for free by liking, commenting, or sharing. We both also have solo projects. I can be found anywhere on social media under @BenziNow. And then I also have a solo YouTube channel called Benzitheseus.
And I also have a solo podcast called Bedroom Eyes, which you can find on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and Podbean. And you can follow me on Twitter @JunoMariah.
I'll have all those links down below. Thank you so much, and see you next time.
Shabba-da-dooba, shabba-da-cha. Scoop, scoop, leap-a-boo, da-dooba-dooba-dooba-da.